Sorry about that, man. This take forever to fire up and load.
Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah. This Kamalabadi is a real big fish. I talked about him once before, and I uploaded some of his Telegram voicemails that he had sent to Hassan Ershad. This guy is fucking everywhere, man. You know, he's openly claiming credit for being the mover and shaker behind the coup in Zimbabwe. He's a major financial advisor for the Chinese. I'm being told, I mean, it was pretty obvious, but under this whole sanctions that's happening in Iran, the Chinese are the major trading power of Iran right now. Which means that essentially the Iranian economy is now a Chinese economy.
Fucking hell.
And this Farzam Kamalabadi is one of the big players representing the Chinese government or the Chamber of Commerce of the Chinese government.
God.
In Iran. And he's talking to some big fish. I mean, I just got told today that, well, he himself let it drop in one of his voice mails to one of the people on Telegram that he knows this guy, Firuz Abadi. Firuz Abadi is a retired Major General of the Revolutionary Guards. He's currently sitting on the Assembly of Experts.
Right.
These are hardliners of the regime. And that this is one of the contacts of this Kamalabadi character. These guys are, because of the economic pressure the United States and the Europeans have put on Iran, and because there's also a trading war between China and the United States and the Europeans, right? These Baha'is are taking advantage of this situation while agitating against the Iranian government on the side of the Americans simultaneously. They're also wheeling and dealing with them under the table simultaneously. Fucking dirty cunts these people are.
That Chinese billionaire who's a Baha'i must somehow, I mean, it's people like her, and I'm sure there are others, but, you know, there's got to be, I mean, because, you know...
He is the guy that introduced that woman to Baha'ism.
Well, there you go, yeah, hey, fuck, okay. Yeah.
He is the guy. He went with Ruhia Maxwell. They were in China because he was at Harvard at the time, studying Chinese and also getting a business degree. They were there during Tiananmen, talking to the Chinese government at that time. Who's
this Ruhia Maxwell?
The wife of Shoghi Effendi.
Right, okay.
The woman that I'm claiming was responsible for his death.
Yeah. Was she of the Maxwell family? That Maxwell family?
Of Montreal, yeah.
Montreal, okay.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
This is a big fish, this guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're obviously right in that post. Like, what, arresting this, detaining this fella, he's got to have done something pretty egregious to actually, for anybody to have the jurisdiction to make that happen. Like,
he is in the entire petroleum exchange setup that is in the Gulf, between these Gulf countries. He's a major player in all of that.
Yeah, right.
So because of that, he gets to talk to, some of the biggest, players and royalty and government and you name it, people like that.
Yeah.
But he's a bit of a loose cannon and a loudmouth, and he brags a lot. Believes himself to be untouchable, but I don't. And he's made this accusation against Hassan Ershad. It's like, come on, man. Hassan Ershad. Who is Hassan Ershad? He's a retailer. He has some Hosa education. He studied. He knows his sources, and he's read a lot of books. but the guy's a retailer with a weekly YouTube program. He doesn't have the kind of pull with the Iranian government that Kamalabadi is accusing him of. He doesn't have that kind of pull.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Iranian government itself has no interest in trying to fuck with this guy, because he himself has bragged openly, and I believe him when he's bragged, that he has been an instrumental player in Iran's sanctions evasions via the Chinese, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So he has kept the government of Iran afloat, been one of the key players responsible for keeping that economy afloat. While he has an address in Rancho Cucamonga in San Bernardino Valley, California, which is an extremely wealthy part of it's outside of LA. So you know homes in that area of San Bernardino cost minimum about $2-3 million. That's his permanent address.
This is how you do it. Well, I mean, I say a soft economic takeover loosely, isn't it?
That's exactly what is happening. This guy's an economic hitman.
Do it.
Kamalabadi is an economic hitman, and he brags about it openly.
Yeah, yeah. Motherfuckers.
You know, he's an economic hitman.
That's what like what you said about why the US is reluctant also to go into a full-on actual war with Iran.
Because you have characters like him and who have in financial interests.
Yeah, yeah, and you also, and it's actually in using, even if you're using however you're using an organization like the Baha'is or the infiltration of that, once you buy the government like that, then
the next step is to take it over.
Yeah.
Because number one, it's not just about, advising a government, okay, do this, trade with this, we'll do this, we'll do that. This guy facilitates things like money laundering. This guy facilitates, black market exchanges. This guy would, facilitate all kinds of things. This guy's an economic hitman. He is, and he is very close to the USJ, and there are pictures of him. So he is part of the Baha'i economic mafia.
Yeah. I mean, whether or not the Baha'i narrative sticks in the end, I mean, and, they may even realize that it may, or, it's just a means to an end again, really, isn't it? Whether they do narrative for as long as they can.
They have realized themselves that no one's buying their narrative. So they're going the other route. We don't care about whether you buy our narrative or not. We want power. And we're going to take it. Whether through this means or through other means. But this shows to you the extent to which that these people are playing this double game, and how they are a major destabilizing force of all of that has happened over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Millions of lives are being destroyed, people uprooted, killed, maimed, raped, while these people are trying to advance their agenda through these sorts of things. These are the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an interest. I mean, that turns it into a different thing, because I mean, they, as you say, they must realize that again. It's not, if people aren't buying it, I mean, it becomes redundant again. I mean, they're buying. Maybe the people who are buying it are the poor, are people who are buying it in Kenya, where they're buying, where they're building this temple, but. Who the fuck even know? Like, you're basically just setting up another arm of money laundering in another country.
You don't even.
I mean, that.
You don't even have to call it that. When you are, because because it's China, the People's Republic of China. They themselves are in an economic war situation with the United States. This guy has a footing in the United States. China wants to keep Iran as one of its major trading, but China also wants to trade with Israel. China is trading with Egypt. China is trading with Saudi Arabia. For the Chinese, it's all about the economy. It's all about the money. It's all about the trade, the resources, right? And this is why I have been saying this from the very beginning, that, you know, exchanging this Anglo-Saxon world power for a Chinese one is, you know, going from, you know, falling from a well into a fucking, you know, canyon.
Yeah.
You know, it's there's no difference. In fact, it's probably even worse. So both of these have to go down together. And what do you find? You find the Baha'is right in the middle of this war, you know, doing their own thing, playing all sides for profit.
Yeah.
I think not even the Chinese realize how dangerous this motherfucker is.
Yeah.
But look at this. All these Chinese policies, anti-Muslim policies that have been coming out over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. It's like all of a sudden they're taking over, you know, they're taking on the Uyghur. You know, the Chinese state media is relentlessly pushing Islamophobic narratives. Like, what the fuck is this about? You know? Now, you know.
Now we know. Yeah. Oh boy.
So why was he detained in Dubai? I think the Germans are onto something.
Yeah.
And they're doing it obviously behind my back, but a lot of it is also showing that these podcasts that I put up on YouTube had their intended effect. And that this post-mortem that they put, they had uncovered something, but under certain state security laws or whatever that I've been looking for over the last 48 hours, you know, they're not obliged to tell me anything. And then I found out later on that during the whole Mykonos thing, the families of the victims of these people had pretty much given up until, you know, basically you had the state prosecutors jumping in and sending indictments right and left. And
right.
All of a sudden the case was hot again. But the families were just snubbed. They were on the verge of giving up, you know, trying to convince German authorities that something was going on. So this could be going on. And they may have followed up a thread, and there may be a Interpol, you know, he might not have a warrant against him, but he may be a person of interest. And all it would take would be for either Interpol or the German government or even the BND in this country to pass something off to the Emiratis saying that this guy is a person of interest in an ongoing criminal investigation. And, you know, these Emirati authorities would get the jitters and deny him entry into their country.
Yeah.
That's all it would take. And it wouldn't matter to them whether how many times he's gone in and out of the Emirates and who he knows. And, you know, this is about the Emiratis taking cover.
Yeah.
They don't want anything like that to you know, touch them.
I mean, it's almost as though it's got to be, you know, like it's almost as though that, you know, with something like this, you almost have to use a person like that who is both, you know, in some ways, it's not as though he's, I mean, if there are other people, he obviously has the money and the connections to be able to do this. If he's somebody who would be, considers himself untouchable, but, you know, I don't know. I mean, do you think he's served is he still continuing to serve a purpose, or do you think that this has, you know, in terms of, because those people do then again to an organisation as big as the Baha'is become potentially expendable because they don't want to be associated with all of the other dirt that, you know, he may actually bring.
This guy's problem is that he's a loose cannon and he's a braggart. And in the world that he's working in, that is a liability, not an asset, especially when there are multiple parties involved that might be dirty, doing things they don't want any attention brought to what they're doing. They don't want any leads to lead to them, that sort of thing. So it is
Oh,
quite possible, and even likely that certain information from his own colleagues or political enemies within the circles he frequents, just to shut him up, maybe have passed certain information about him and maybe his immediate associates to European governments, and then these European governments turn around and put pressure. Because I just realized today that Germany has not only security arrangements with the Emirates, but
yeah,
a lot of the Mercedes, BMW,
yeah,
some of these big machine
yeah,
companies have contracts with the government of the Emirates.
yeah.
These are huge contracts.
They love their cars.
They
They love
their
their
cars.
they love their European cars.
The
Yeah,
engines for a lot of the Emirates airplanes, these
yeah,
are German engines.
yeah, 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 yeah. A lot of they have massive. Germany has massive contracts also with flight maintenance. Like when they actually Lufthansa actually contracts out to do a lot of the maintenance on like the fleets and that, and they do overhauls and they do it. But they actually do that for Emirates as well. Um, yeah, yeah, interesting.
And suddenly this guy gets detained in Dubai.
Yeah,
So it's not Hassan Ershad. Ershad has no pull.
no,
He's nobody, He's just a guy,
no,
you know, with some problems even in his anti-Baha'i discourse, because he
yeah,
constantly veers into bullshit anti-Baha'i discourse. But nevertheless, they don't like this guy because, and a lot of the angles that he has pursued that have been effective are stuff that I have been feeding to him over the years.
yeah,
You know, and whenever he's pursued that line, it's been effective, and people listen to him, and he's done severe damage, to the public relations of the Baha'is within Iran itself.
yeah,
You know, and they find him a threat, but he's not that big of a fish to be able to influence a government. He's not that big of a fish to be able to influence these people sitting in the assembly of experts. This retired Major General of the Revolutionary Guards, Firuzabadi, Hassan Firuzabadi. I couldn't believe it. It was like, holy... I mean, this infiltration of the system in Iran exceeds even what I thought. It's
yeah,
not on any kind of a low... Because Firuzabadi is close to Khamenei himself. These
yeah,
are major military figures of Iran, and that entire security and military and intelligence apparatus within the Islamic Republic answers directly to Khamenei, not to the president. And he's got a contact with these people.
God, the infighting in that regime must be just fucking intense.
Ferocious, but it has from day one, and all of the originary members of the revolutionary cadre, major ones, one by one fell afoul of the system after a while because of this infighting. Montazeri
Yeah,
is a perfect example. He was supposed to become Khomeini's successor. He had a falling out with Khomeini himself 6 months before Khomeini's death. And they
yeah,
cut him out, and did what they did with him. He was under house arrest for over 15 years afterwards. So this Mir Hossein Mousavi, who ran for president in 2009, he was the prime minister during the entire 8-year war. You know,
mm,
and
wow,
so the infight. Ahmad Khomeini. Now we're finding out he was murdered by these
mm,
individuals close to Khamenei. Yet Ahmad Khomeini was one of the people that facilitated the rise of Khamenei himself. Ahmad Khomeini was the son of Khomeini.
yeah,
Yeah, so the infighting and this constant power struggle within that system is ferocious, and this is what makes it weak, and creates the kind of fissures that allows these kind of forces like Kamalabadi and the Baha'is to get in. And when you're at that top level and you see all of this infighting and you know what the corruptions are, and everybody's, blackmailing everybody else because everybody's corrupt within that system, of course you're going to talk to the Baha'is. Yeah. There's no longer any ideology here. You're not, you don't believe in any of this stuff.
No. And I mean, this is how obviously. Yeah, I mean, this is how the Anglo-American alliance, but it's how Israel obviously works its way through all of this in terms of its soft power.
And Kamalabadi is one of these people.
Yeah.
And what does that tell you about the nature of these wars that are going on in that region?
Yeah.
It's all a fucking joke.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it's the only reason why you'd also allow this financial system to get this fucking out of control in terms of all of the offshore, sort of assets that you can set up. And I mean, they literally, the lawyers, that this was the paper that I did with my dad at the last Agri-Food. They literally called themselves, these group of about 10 or 15 lawyers or law firms in the UK, they called themselves the Offshore Magic Circle. Outright. And they were the ones all coming from the city as well that developed the legal framework and processed all of these, allowed these offshore accounts to be set up that were discovered in the Panama Papers and all of that. Just call themselves the Offshore Magic Circle. Because that is such an important instrument in all of this, to get around these, as you said, to exercise this sort of power in terms of getting around sanctions, etc., or using the sanctions to force people's hands like this.
You know what I have found out from Telegram, just by these mere associations with people in Iran, in these in these anti-Baha'i circles, is probably more now than most. I'm almost certain, definitely more than what ASIO knows. Maybe not the Germans, because there's a sizable Iranian population here in Germany.
Yeah.
But I would know more than the Aussies do.
Yeah.
Just by Telegram.
Yeah.
Just by talking to people, in these anti-Baha'i circles, that's it. I mean, this thing with Kamalabadi is just, the more I have done, the more information, it's just everybody's mouth has dropped to the floor. And the guy just brags about what he's doing, openly. His sister was part of the 7-man Yaran, right? That were given a prison sentence for life in 2009 for espionage. Okay? Yeah. How do you just suddenly decide that you're going to commute these entire sentences and release these people like they just did? How does that even fucking work?
Yeah.
In which judicial system do people get put away for espionage and high treason and then 10 years later find themselves out? And meanwhile, during the entire 10 years of that prison sentence, they're being given home visits every weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, and why it's not, although the Baha'is might like to claim that it's international pressure or whatever, the regime isn't that fucking interested in that much pressure on them to actually yield, somehow yield to that. Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. because they would stick to their guns on espionage. Like,
but obviously the pressures from the sanctions and also the disturbances within Iran,
yeah,
that keep cropping up. People are unhappy, and they have every right to be unhappy. And the fact of the matter is that the people at the top of the system, because they want to maintain their positions, are willing to do any deal with any devil that comes, including the very devils that they've denounced from the beginning of the revolution.
Yeah.
But this tells me, man, that what Robert Dreyfuss wrote in that book, and those conversations I had with this guy while I was in London, is spot on the money. The Baha'is have never been against these guys. They have encouraged anti-Baha'i activism as a cover, as a smokescreen, because it has both helped their these clients, these mullah clients of theirs, and themselves simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which tells you that was not a revolution in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Kevin and I have talked a lot about this in private conversation, and what happened in Iran. I mean, you didn't even need the direct American involvement, like in a color revolution. What happened is so obvious right now. Kermit Roosevelt came to Iran in 1953 to overthrow Mossadegh. He basically organized the local mafia in Iran to create these massive networks. Right? These massive networks 10 years later became a problem for the Shah, but at the time he had a very able court minister that managed to maneuver around the problems and put these people these genies back in the bottle. But that didn't mean that these forces that had been sitting there latent since August 1953 suddenly went away. No. At a certain point, they turned against the Shah himself, just like as they had been made to turn against Mossadegh. And these were internal forces controlled by the plutocrats within Iran itself that wanted to see Mohammad Reza Pahlavi go because, for whatever reasons they had, not that this is that this paints the Shah as any kind of a lovely guy. He wasn't. But what it says that what happened in Iran in 1978 and 79 was not a revolution; it was a coup d'état, and it was a coup d'état by the plutocrats within that system, the money, the financial elites, none of whom were touched during that whole revolutionary bloodletting. They brought the mullahs to power. They brought Khomeini to power as a way to protect their own interests, protect their money, protect their privileges, and that's the way it has been. This has been a feudal coup d'état from within that system. People who went in the street thought they were, overthrowing a dictator, and they thought that they were maybe bringing a better system to Iran, but that's been the facade the whole time. So this Robert Dreyfuss was absolutely spot on correct. And who was right smack in the middle of it? The Baha'is. Why were they involved? Well, very simple, because for 20 years, even though they had key members of their own people within the regime of the Shah, they had been pushing the Shah for several things, one of which was that they wanted formal recognition. And as much as, the Shah's physician was a Baha'i, the deputy head of Savak, who was effectively the leader of Savak as a whole, because the leader of Savak was just a ceremonial figure. Parviz Salati, he was the deputy head of Savak for 20 years until the revolution, so he ran that thing. They wanted more and more power. The Shah was not willing to give it to them. Even though he entertained them within the system, within his royal court, allowed them to get wealthy, allowed them all of these, privileges, but he wouldn't give them certain things. He wouldn't allow them to take over, for example, the banking system in Iran, which one of these Baha'i mafioso, this Hojabri Azdani, actually attempted to do. He tried to take over the Iranian National Bank, wanted to buy it out.
Can you imagine what would have happened if that?
They stopped him. So what do these people do? They turned around and created all this turmoil, got rid of the Shah. They didn't care if these people, their own flock, people they may have known, got murdered and killed.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
No, it's fucking irrelevant. It's a means. It's a very small means to an end if that happens. Yeah. Yeah.
I pressed this Robert Dreyfuss in 2011 for sources, and he says that he has all these sources but he was not at liberty to, to give these sources away because it would compromise contacts that were still alive at the time.
Yeah.
And my only conclusion is that these contacts that he's talking about were probably insiders within Savak. People who were passing on this information because they were observing what their superiors were doing.
Yeah, I mean, this then makes more sense of why, in some ways, that that the Iranian government also hasn't necessarily contacted you personally, or like hasn't, actually come to any of this, or because it's not even about the narrative it's not about the narrative.
It's about pure self-interest, about money. And protecting it.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It is really fucked. It's worse than the more I dig, the worse the story becomes. It's just like unbelievable. So, if this is what you're dealing with, it is nothing for them to organize a hit on somebody.
No, it's nothing. It's nothing. No. Yeah, you can get any kind of hit you want. I mean, this is, you don't even need to think about dark web hiring hit people. You have access to whoever you want, ex-military, ex-intelligence service, whatever. With that kind of money, that kind of influence, it's just a no-brainer.
With state-of-the-art technology that even governments themselves would be reluctant to utilize.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think a lot of people, I think very few people realize how fundamentally different that these, people, the people like this actually live in, and how that kind of wealth, what they're actually, the type of power plays that they're dealing with at that level of wealth, they no conception of that. Jesus.
It's unbelievable, but the more you dig, this is what you find. And in specifically in the case of Iran. And now, these people are coming more and more out into the open. The villas that they're building for themselves. When one observes their behavior, they are living in a completely parallel kind of world. You look at Iran as an Islamic republic, even though, they have gotten quite lax on certain things that they were quite strict on at the beginning. But these people, I mean, you look at their, photos of their villas and their homes and their lifestyles and their cars, and it's like, is this Monte Carlo or is this Iran? And it's just like, what is going on? And the government tolerates all of this? Yeah. They allowed the members of the government to make this is the way they have figured out to maintain their own power and status, is that you don't, if they're government people, and they find a way to corrupt these people if they aren't already corrupted, and they allow these people to make some wealth on their own as well, take a cut.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the kind of behavior that Epstein is implicated in terms of how, I mean, just the classic gathering of material to blackmail people. That's fucking all it is based on. I mean, it is mind-boggling that this demon is fueled just by the complete most basic instincts and out of control desires.
Yeah. This is the DB, man. This is the world of the DB.
Yeah, this is the world of the DB. Yeah.
And these people need to be dealt with. You know?
They what? Sorry, just lost it.
These people need to be dealt with en masse.
Yeah.
I mean, Iran was supposed to be, I mean, if you look at it from its own narrative, right, rather than the reality, this was supposed to be a beacon of revolutionary hope. Okay, but then you look at what these people have done. From the very moment that Khomeini came back to Iran, and they were not remotely serious about any one word that they said. And even their own people around them who were true believers, one fell afoul or got corrupted. One of the two.
Yeah.
And the Baha'is have played the long game. They were in that former system, so they knew how that worked. So they had a perspective on things that a new regime would ostensibly need. And at some point, at the very beginning, this new regime realized, well, as long as they let us have this little persecution game, we will talk to their plutocrats.
Yeah.
And so here we are, 40 years later. And these people are openly bragging about it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh.
It's pretty fucked up, Sam. It is really, really fucked up stuff.
It's very fucked up. It's